All right, but to explain all these mysterious fiscal cliff incantations, we are pleased to welcome back Pennsylvania Republican Senator Pat Toomey, who understands all this. Senator Toomey, thank you for coming back.
Thanks
I
for
just
having
have
me,
a
Larry.
simple question. There's about a month to go. How is this going to end? Help us out.
Larry, I sure wish I knew, and I think the opportunity is still there to get something done. I certainly hope we do it because the tax increases that are scheduled to go into effect, as you well know, on January 1 will be devastating if they happen. And so I and many of my colleagues have been working really hard to try to find a way to avoid this. What we really need is for the president to offer a solution to the problem. The fiscal problem we face is this huge run-up in spending that's already occurred and that which is underway and going to continue. If the president isn't willing to address the explosion in spending, then we're not going to solve this problem.
Well,
and that's what we're insisting on.
I know. I mean, I haven't seen any spending cuts. I haven't seen any talk of spending cuts.
There haven't been any.
I haven't seen anybody say, here's how we're going to replace the across-the-board sequester. I see him throwing the sequester out. That was $1.2 trillion or whatever's left of it. I'm just saying I don't see any spending. What do you think President Obama's going to say tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. when he talks?
I don't know what he's going to say. I'm eagerly awaiting because we need some specifics from this president. You know, Larry, one of the most compelling facts I think that we need to focus on is just three categories of federal spending: interest on our debt, the Social Security program, and mandatory health care spending. They are scheduled to consume 90% of all the revenue the government can hope to collect within just 10 years. That's how pressing this is. That's how unsustainable this is. And for the president to remain silent about this, that's not going to work.
And, Senator, leading Democrats are saying today that entitlements are off the table. So I don't see how you do that. John Boehner said, OK, we'll give you some revenues off of capping deductions for loopholes and so forth. Well, you give us some entitlements. But what we heard today from Mr. Durbin, who I think is sometimes pretty good on this stuff, and others, is entitlements for this year, for this fiscal cliff exercise, they're off the table. Now, that seems to me to be an obstacle, an impediment, a barrier to a solution for something that's going to come due in 30 days and put us in a recession.
Larry, it's very disturbing. This is the entire problem. And now this is, for me, it's a replay of what happened in the super committee where some of us, myself included, bent over backwards, tried to accommodate even demands that we didn't think were reasonable or necessary, all to just try to persuade our Democratic friends to address the actual problem of spending. And we weren't successful, as you know. Now, my hope is the election's behind us now. Can we get to governing? Can we actually do what America needs so badly, which is avoid this massive tax increase? I sure hope we can. You know, a number of Republicans have proposed budgets. We've had them on the Senate floor. We've debated them. We've voted on them. The House has passed budgets. We've laid out various ways that we can solve this fiscal problem. It's time that our friends on the other side offered some ideas.
Well, Senator, you were a major player in that whole exercise last year. You had a two-part plan. You had a tax part and a spending part. Can you briefly just review that? Maybe people ought to hear that, and maybe that will work this time.
Well, you know, let me be clear. I don't think that revenue is the problem, but I know that the other side made that a precondition. And so my argument was, if we're going to have any revenue at all, number one, it can only come in the context of pro-growth tax reform that actually lowers marginal rates and then offsets that lost revenue by reducing the value of deductions and loopholes and write-offs. And secondly, you've got to agree to actually address the real problem here, which is putting our entitlement programs on a sustainable path. I still think that's the right combination. That's a solution that ought to be able to work, even though we shouldn't have to part with more revenue. But you know, you're hearing the same kinds of things that I'm hearing, and so far it's been a little bit disturbing.
You know, Senator, it seems to me every nickel of new revenue should be designated towards debt reduction, so it cannot be spent. That should be a condition. Mr. Boehner has reached out and he said, okay, we're going to cap some deductions. That's going to provide revenue. I don't know how much, 400 or 500 billion. I have no idea. But what I'm saying, sir, is why can't that be stipulated? Why can't that be absolutely earmarked towards debt reduction so it cannot be spent?
Well, as you know, we're running over $1 trillion deficit. You know, even if it's a few $100 billion of revenue, all it's going to do is reduce the total amount of borrowing. But I agree completely that we've got to have a commitment on spending, and it's got to be immediate, it's got to be current, it's got to take effect immediately. It can't be a promise for future spending cuts, and it's really got to be programmatic in nature. It can't be the kind of spending cap that Congress just waives in the future, which they've done so many times before.
I mean, just last point. Is it possible to have rules? A lot of famous economists, John Taylor, people like that, Glenn Hubbard, they say we should have a rules-based fiscal policy on spending. Why not have a cap on spending as a share of GDP, like 20%, for example. Why not have a cap on debt as a share of GDP? So it's close to 100% now with all the gross debt. Why not move that? Say our goal is to put it at 60% or 50%. Why not rules? Why not caps?
Well, the answer is you could, and I'd support it, except that we just ought to be practical and realize that whatever rules Congress sets, Congress can break. We've got a law in place that forces Congress to pass a budget, and for 3 consecutive years, Senator Reid and the Democrat majorities have refused to do a budget. It's not a rule, it's a law, it's the statute, and they choose not to abide by it. So I'm in favor of some of these rules, but I'm just recognizing that at the end of the day, what matters more is who do you actually send to Washington and what do they believe in and what are they dedicated to, because rules can be circumvented.
All right. Well, we got a little more than a month to go, and nobody seems to know how this is going to play out.
There's still time to get this done. I sure hope we can.
All right. Senator Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania, many, many thanks for coming on.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Larry.
it. Speaking of running